Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we talk about 10 more horror movies that I highly recommend. And with that, let's get to the list.
Hello, Ginny Pin.
Yeah. Good night, Ginny Pin.
The Rule of Ginny Pin is a 2024 New Zealand psychological horror movie. Co-written and directed by James Ashcroft, it stars Geoffrey Rush, John Lithgow, and George Hanar. Confined to a secluded rest home and trapped within a stroke-ridden body, a former judge must stop an elderly psychopath who uses a puppet to abuse the home's residents.
What's going to happen is you'll get worse and worse till you can't speak or even lift a finger. That's if you can still think straight enough to know what kind of hell you're in.
So I was able to see this in theaters last night. It is a limited release right now in theaters, but it is going to drop on Shudder in just a couple weeks. So if you don't catch it in theaters, you could see it there. But I thought this movie was amazing. I love it. It's so intense. It's emotional. It's full of dread and anxiety. It deals with a lot of deep, powerful issues. There's a sadness to it, definitely, but at the same time, there's this sense of peace about it as well. It's just a very complex movie, and this same filmmaker, James Ashcroft, did another movie a couple years ago that I've been raving about ever since I saw it, and it's called Coming Home in the Dark over on Netflix. And that's about as dark and demented and just off-putting and upsetting movie as you'll see. But just like this one, it's incredibly well done. And I cannot rave enough about the performance from Geoffrey Rush and John Lithgow. The two of them just going at it in this movie. Their dialogue, their acting prowess, the characters they play. I mean, John Lithgow is almost unrecognizable in this role. And they both are super brave and put themselves in some really vulnerable positions and it's just a brave performance from both of them, showing their age, showing their bodies. I mean, they are not holding anything back in this movie. And this is not a movie that paints growing old as this beautiful thing. Like, it does show the tragicness of it, how hard it is on the body. And as someone who's been dealing with medical issues for a number of years now, and I'm starting to see that aging thing happening and having to deal with struggles of my own, it just hit home really hard for me. But beyond that, it is just a fantastic psychological thriller because it keeps you guessing throughout this movie on what is reality and what is fantasy, what is the delusions, because Geoffrey Rush's character is also dealing with the on stages of dementia. So you're never quite sure if what he's seeing is actually happening or not. And by the end, it does give you a satisfying conclusion. You do get answers. It's not one of those that leaves it up for you to decide, but at the same time, it's just very mysterious and creepy at the way it unfolds. So I think The Rule of Ginny Pin is definitely a must-see if you're able to go see it in a theater now or in a couple weeks on Shudder. It's absolutely worth your time.
No, stop it. Oh! Wow, that hurt. That one hurt the most.
Novocain is a 2025 action thriller directed by Dan Burke and Robert Olson. It stars Jack Quaid, Amber Midthunder, and Ray Nicholson. When the girl of his dreams is kidnapped, a man incapable of feeling physical pain turns his rare condition into an unexpected advantage to rescue her.
Hey man, you okay?
So here's another new one that actually comes out in theaters this week. I was able to see it a little bit early at an advanced screening, and I had a blast with it. It's almost cartoon levels of silliness at times. It's one you really don't take serious. It's one of those where you have to really suspend disbelief. You have to check it at the door and just go in believing the universe that you're in, the rules that are set up and just go with it, because people don't act realistic in this. The boundaries that they push his abilities of not feeling pain is into superhero levels almost. I mean, there's just a lot of campy, goofy, over-the-top scenes. Just in general, it's a fun, action-packed good time. And there's definitely humor in it, but I wouldn't call it a comedy at all. It's much more of a lighthearted action rom-com thriller. And I wouldn't normally talk about a movie like this on most of my list. It just doesn't have that horror tone, and it is only a little bit even thriller. Except for one thing, the gore. I mean, if you enjoy gore and practical effects, then you're gonna eat up this movie, because it goes hard into the gore. There is some really uncomfortable, disturbing, and just absolutely gross scenes in this. I mean, the levels that they push some of the stuff, especially towards the end, even made me wince, and that's rare because there's not much I haven't seen on film. And the entire cast here is great. I've been really enjoying a lot of what Jack Quaid's been doing. He was fantastic in Companion. He's great in this. Plays a very different character in this than he did in Companion. It was also fantastic to see Amber Midthunder getting another role, because I was blown away by her in Prey a couple years ago. And so to see her again playing a very, very different role was great too. But the big surprise for me in this was Ray Nicholson. Because if you're not familiar, that's Jack Nicholson's son, and we saw him briefly in Smile 2, but this is the first time I've really seen him acting. And he is so charismatic and fun to watch, just does a great job in this. And I can hear a lot of you out there groaning and saying nepotism, because not only do we have Jack Quaid, who's the son of Dennis Quaid in this, but we have Ray Nicholson, who's the son of Jack Nicholson. And trust me, I get where you're coming from. But my whole rule of thumb is this: it doesn't matter what job you are doing. It doesn't matter what leg up you've gotten to get there. If when you do get there, you do a damn good job and you work your ass off and you earn that spot, that's what matters to me. And at least from what I've seen to this point from both these guys, they can act. Like, they really do a great job. And I'm just impressed with their work, and I don't think that it should be just poo-pooed aside who their dads are, and that their performances aren't also worth them being in these roles. But I just think if you check your brain at the door and go into this just looking to be entertained, you'll have a great time with it.
I don't like you.
But I'm you.
I'm not you. I'm gonna kill you.
Mickey 17 is a 2025 sci-fi dark comedy thriller. Produced, written, and directed by Bong Joon-ho. It's based on the 2022 novel Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton and stars Robert Pattinson, Naomi Ackie, and Mark Ruffalo. Mickey 17, known as an expendable, goes on a dangerous journey to colonize an ice planet.
I'm sure you're used to it by now, but
What's it feel like to die?
Even on my 17th go-around, I hate dying.
Man, I've been hearing so much criticism thrown at this movie, and I'm gonna be honest with you, is it perfect? No. It's definitely a little clunky. It's a little bit overwhelming. It's a little messy, I guess is the best way to put it. There's a lot of dialogue, a lot of different ideas that come at you pretty fast, especially in the final act, that get a little jumbled and, like I said, are a little messy. But I had a great time with this movie. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I love the world that's set up here. I love the characters. I think Robert Pattinson is just fantastic in this. He has this weird nasally voice, and at first you're kind of like, I don't know about this character, but pretty quickly on, you just grow to care about this guy. And he just transforms into this totally different person. But it's just zany. It's just weird. It's super sci-fi with thriller elements. It's a little bit gory and definitely gross at times. It's very dystopian, very creative, very imaginative. And Bong Joon-ho has done some fantastic movies. The one he's most credited for is Parasite, because he won an Academy Award. But he also did Snowpiercer, so we can't forget that. But then my favorite of his is probably The Host. That movie has just so much emotion and impact and social statements that it's making about his culture, and it's just a great movie. I'm not going to go off on that one, but the guy just makes great movies. And this is a much more lighthearted one and definitely a more of a campy silliness than his other movies. But with that being said, I wouldn't call it a comedy either. I mean, there's a lot of political statements in this. Some of them are a little too heavy-handed, like especially the character that Mark Ruffalo plays. It's very clear who he is basically taking his character from. And I thought that's heavy-handed. I felt like we didn't need to be that much of a parody, you know, didn't have a place, at least for me. It just kind of bugged me. Not that I care politically either way, to be honest, but it just felt like, I don't know, a little cheap, a little bit like, you know, low-hanging fruit, so to speak. But beyond that, there's statements to do with what we're doing to our planet. There's statements to do with how we treat each other. Like, there's a lot of stuff, underlying message kind of stuff in this movie, but yet it's still entertaining as all hell. And there's just fantastic alien designs, creature designs, sci-fi kind of tech that's fun to watch. And no matter what criticism you throw at this movie, I think once again we see and know how talented Bong Joon-ho is. Like, the movie looks incredible, and maybe the script wasn't perfect. You know, maybe that's where some of the flaws are, because like I said, it gets a little muddled, especially in the final act. But as much as I'll admit that this movie is flawed, I do still think it's a great time and one you definitely should check out. Smile 2 is a 2024 psychological supernatural horror movie. Written and directed by Parker Finn, it's a sequel to Smile from 2022 and stars Naomi Scott, Kyle Gallner, and Dylan Galula. A pop star begins to experience a series of increasingly disturbing events as she's about to go on tour.
This thing is a parasite. You witnessed a death. Now it's latched onto you.
I am such a big fan of this movie, and I almost feel like it got overshadowed last year because there was a few that were just so good, because it was kind of overshadowed by Strange Darling and of course The Substance, as well as at the end of the year by Nosferatu. So it just, I don't think, got as much love as it deserves, even from me. I just think it's a fantastic movie. It's so well done, because as big of a fan as I was of Smile back in 2022, and I never thought a sequel could even live up to it, because it's rare to see a sequel that can even come close to as good as the first. But at least in my opinion, I think Smile 2 is better. I think the character development is better. I think Naomi Scott is just unbelievable in this. And another thing that got overlooked because of the other performances from other people in different movies was her performance, because not only is her acting just incredible, but she's also got to get up on stage and sing and dance and pull off full on a pop star persona, and she does an incredible job of that. Another thing is, after I watched this movie, I kind of went down a rabbit hole and started listening to her music, and her songs from the movie are great, but also a lot of the stuff that she's done on her own prior to making this movie. Like, she's just super talented. I love her voice, and I think her music, if you're a fan of pop music, is phenomenal as well. But this movie is brutal. It's disturbing. It's off-putting. It puts you in so many uncomfortable different situations and keeps you guessing the entire runtime. And I know that the ending has gotten hate from quite a few people, but personally, I think the ending is amazing, because it makes you question the entire movie and rerun through the movie and try to figure out what exactly you just watched and when and how things developed the way they do. And I'm trying to be coy because I know there's still people out there that haven't seen it. But the fact that now Smile 2 is available to watch for free if you have a Prime Video account, now is a fantastic time to see it. So if you have yet to see this and you trust my opinion at all, do yourself a favor and make this the next thing that you watch.
Turistas.
Oh God, I wanna go home!
Turistas is a 2006 horror movie. produced and directed by John Stockwell. It stars Josh Duhamel, Melissa George, and Olivia Wilde. A group of young backpackers, vacation turns sour when a bus accident leaves them marooned in a remote rural area that holds an ominous secret.
Hola.
Who the hell are these people?
This movie is so underrated. It is crazy because for that era, it's much, much better than most of the teen, young, pretty people horror movies are, because most of them are so cheap. The acting isn't great, but if you know this cast, all of these people have gone on to have great careers. And even though this is a young, pretty people kind of cast at the time, they still already had chops and could act. Beyond that, it gets vicious, it's disturbing, it's creepy, it is very uncomfortable and super intense. It's also gorgeously shot. The cinematography, the location is just beautiful. They're in Brazil, and the beaches and everything, the jungles, but then also the set, the house and the places that they go in this are all really well done and look fantastic as well. It's just always one of those movies that always surprises me how little I hear it talked about, and it just has never gotten any love whatsoever. And I just think that that's a real shame, because Turistas is definitely worth checking out. So for a few bucks right now, I think it's absolutely worth a rental.
It's suffering. Just like you are.
Presence is a 2024 supernatural drama thriller. Directed by Steven Soderbergh, it stars Lucy Liu, Julia Fox, and Chris Sullivan. A family becomes convinced that they are not alone after moving into a new home in the suburbs.
She just stopped breathing. Dead in her own bed. Can you imagine the parents finding her?
So I think that this movie was really misrepresented by the trailer and the way that it was marketed in general when it was released back in January. And I get it. They were trying to angle it towards the horror crowd, hoping that it would get a little bit of buzz and that people would go see it and they would make its money back. I get it. It's a small little movie, but it's Steven Soderbergh. It's not a horror movie. The guy does not make horror movies. And even if he thought he was making a horror movie here, that's just not what it really is at its core. It is a thriller. It is supernatural. It does have some creepy moments, but for the most part, this movie feels like a drama with dread and anxiety and like a family drama where this family is struggling with a lot of different issues and trying to work through a lot of those while their teenage daughter is dealing with death for the first time and trying to come to grips with that. And there's just a lot of layers to the story, and I think it's really well done. I think it's a damn good movie. It's just one of those that, because it was angled as more of a horror movie and not as much of a supernatural thriller, I think that the wrong word of mouth got out when people went and saw this. But it's really interesting in the way that it's shot, because the entire movie is shot from the ghost point of view. And so the whole thing, you just feel like you're floating around and kind of observing the different things that are happening in this house, and you can't leave, and so you're only getting kind of fragments and pieces of some of these different stories and different things that are going on, because you're only able to be privy of those of what you hear in the house. So if anybody leaves the house, immediately you're in the dark. You don't know what's happening beyond what you see in the house. So it's just a very cool and interesting way to tell a story. And it's really well directed in that way. It looks fantastic. The cast do an absolutely great job in it. It's one of those where the novelty, the uniqueness of the way that it's shot, that experimental thing is cool, and it might get you there, but the story and the performances and all of that are what keep you invested. But it is very much a slow burn. It's not something that's crazy, exciting, intense, and all that. It does have its moments, especially towards the end, but for the most part, like I said, it's a dark family drama that is dealing with the dread and the sadness and anxiety and things like that that put it into that horror thriller world. But if that sounds intriguing to you, then I think Presence is definitely worth your time. It is still a little bit pricey to rent, but I think if you give it a few more weeks, that'll drop. And I'm not sure when, but I'm sure this will be streaming on one of the platforms, Hulu or Netflix or something, in the near future. So either way, it's one to keep on your radar and add to your list.
You're seeing something that you were just not supposed to see.
The Found Footage Phenomena is a 2021 independent documentary. It focuses on the origins of the found footage subgenre, tracking it through to the technique's current form and asking what the future holds for it. And it was written and directed by Sarah Appleton and Philip Escott.
This film's one of the first that really involved the camera.
Why do you still have this stupid thing? Just put it down.
Now we live in a world that is found footage.
If you're a fan of found footage like I am, this is one you definitely need to see because it really helps you to appreciate the subgenre more. And it also set me on to a number of found footage movies I had never heard of that ended up being really good, ones that I've included in different lists here in the past. It does a great job of looking at the behind the scenes and talking to the different people involved and shining a light onto some of the best creators and the people that have done stuff like the pioneers in the genre, as well as up and coming filmmakers who are pushing the boundaries and moving the subgenre forward into the future. I think if you just enjoy documentaries as well about film and history of film, then Found Footage Phenomena is a fantastic movie.
Would you mind getting inside the oven to clean it?
Stop! Nana, stop!
The Visit is a 2015 found footage horror movie, written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. It stars Olivia DeJonge, Ed Oxenbould, and Catherine Hahn. Two siblings become increasingly frightened by their grandparents' disturbing behavior while visiting them on vacation.
Mom, there's something wrong with Nana and Papa.
They're just old. Bear with it for a couple of days.
I think this is one of the best M. Night movies of the last 10 years. You'd probably put maybe Split above it, but beyond that, I mean, this is the only one besides that jumps to mind as one of his that really still works. Because his films are really up and down. Some of them are great, of course, and then some of them are not so great. People are fans of them regardless. I'm not knocking anybody for whatever of his that you enjoy. Me personally, don't like a lot of them. Haven't been a big fan, especially of his last couple. But this one, on the other hand, I think is just brilliant. The cast is phenomenal in this. The setting, the location, it's so simple and yet feels complex. It feels creepy. There's ways of adding layers to it, like the stuff underneath the house and the way that's shot and the way that looks. Super creative filmmaking. The fact that this movie is basically a found footage movie but doesn't really feel like it. It's easy to forget that it is because it's so well put together. It just doesn't have that found footage vibe. And the thing that M. Night is so well known for is his twist. And this, at least for me, was one of his that actually got me. I did not see it coming. It really caught me off guard, and I thought was just fantastically handled. The way it was revealed, all the different things like that, a lot of fun. So when I saw that The Visit was dropping on Tubi to watch for free right now, I had to talk about it, so that's why I put it on this list.
I'm ready.
Nosferatu is a 2024 horror movie. Written and directed by Robert Eggers, is a remake of the silent film Nosferatu from 1922, which was an unauthorized adaptation of the 1897 novel Dracula. It stars Bill Skarsgård, Lily Rose Depp, and Nicholas Hoult. It's a gothic tale of obsession between a haunted young woman and the terrifying vampire infatuated with her.
Its desire is to consume all life on Earth.
So if you've been watching this channel the last few months, you know I'm a huge fan of this. I put it as my #1 of the year. If I were to redo that list, I think I would probably just barely edge it out with The Substance. I would have replaced it as my #1 because The Substance It's just one of those things where I saw this at the very end of the year, was blown away by it, and the recency bias put it slightly above the substance. But now that I've had time to think about it and digest it and all that, I would put the substance above it. But that being said, this movie I find to be incredible and just really what I think is film art. Because yeah, I've heard a lot of people complaining about the story. It's like, yeah, well, it's just simply the same story we've seen a bunch of times. It's Dracula, you know, it's Nosferatu. It's basically the same story. So I don't know what you were expecting as far as that goes. So the reason you go to see this is the performances, the art, the cinematography, the way it looks, the lighting, the sets. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And I mean, holy shit, Bill Skarsgård is just unrecognizable as Count Orlok, and he is so creepy. And I think that Robert Eggers, at least for me, my own personal taste, captures evil and oppressive and just that dark, disturbing nature, that feeling, that vibe, that energy, as well as anyone I've seen. To me, it just oozes from this movie, just the way it feels, the way it looks. It's just this evil that works like a fog, and it just kind of comes over you. And I know that doesn't work for everyone, and that's cool. Like, this movie isn't for everyone. It's like most of Eggers' movies. If you enjoy movies that are period pieces, attention to detail, like beautifully shot, like this, you know, slow burn, amazing sets and costume design and all that kind of stuff. If that's not your jam, then this is just not for you. But if those are the things you appreciate and enjoy and love about horror, as well as other things, but if that's one of the styles of horror movies that you love, Nosferatu is about as good as you're gonna see. So if you're one of the few out there that have yet to see this, it's available to stream for free with an account on Peacock right now. So do yourself a favor, make up your own mind. This may or may not be for you, but I think no matter what, you should be part of the conversation.
I get it! I'm fixing it! Come on!
Quarantine is a 2008 found footage horror movie directed by John Eric Dowdle. It's an American remake of the 2007 Spanish film Wreck and stars Jennifer Carpenter, Jay Hernandez, and Steve Harris. A television reporter and her cameraman are trapped inside a building quarantined by the CDC, which turns humans into bloodthirsty killers.
We have an officer down. I need an ambulance immediately.
Do not try to leave the building. This will all be over shortly.
So as I mentioned, if you weren't aware, this is the American remake of Wreck. And I'm not gonna lie, I do think Wreck is a better movie, but I saw this one first, and so there is definitely still a nostalgic love for this movie that I can't get rid of. I also think that it's enjoyable and entertaining and fun in its own way. But it's one of those movies that if you've seen this and yet to see Wreck, you really need to check Wreck out because it's incredible. But this movie is still entertaining. It's intense. It's really creepy and unnerving. The way that it's shot, the cast do a fantastic job. I'm a fan of Jennifer Carpenter's, definitely from her Dexter years, but also in this role. She does a great job here. And I think that this movie has kind of been forgotten and shoved aside a little bit because it is the American remake. And I get that, but I do still think it's a damn good movie on its own. Yes, it doesn't do anything super different than the original, but I think the fact that it's American and the way it's handled is a little bit different. And it hits home for me, especially after the pandemic and dealing with outbreaks and quarantine and all of that kind of stuff. This movie has that even more of a disturbing edge to it. But I just think it's an intense nail biter that'll keep you on the edge of your seat and is just a great time and a perfect pick for this Saturday night. So do yourself a favor this weekend, pick one of the movies off of this list, grab your popcorn and your candy, and enjoy! And I want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so so much to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description, or you can become a channel member by clicking on the join button down there and help support the channel that way. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button, and remember guys, horror can be fun! And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about 10 more horror movies that I highly recommend. And I'll see you guys next time!